This is week 198 of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I'm Anna Belokur, reporting to you from Kyiv, and I'll be taking you through the top stories from Ukraine this week. The question has once again been posed: will Volodymyr Zelensky be Ukraine's only wartime president? A lot of this talk centers around something US President Donald Trump said this week. In an interview with Politico on Monday, Trump said that Ukraine is using war to not hold an election, and that he thinks doing so as soon as possible is important. This is a worrying case of a Kremlin narrative coming out of an American politician's mouth, suggesting that Zelensky is an illegitimate leader, unfit to negotiate with. Ukraine hasn't held nationwide elections since Russia's full-scale invasion began in 2022. In wartime, the whole country is under martial law, with millions of civilians displaced from their homes by fighting, and many others away from home serving in the armed forces. This makes political campaigns and elections almost impossible, because how could it be ensured that all deployed service people would be given the opportunity to vote, or the millions of citizens currently living abroad as refugees? How could the territories occupied by Russia be accounted for, especially given how many residents are dispersed across other parts of Ukraine? How can one set up and operate polling infrastructure amid daily attacks and airstrikes? And a recurring, more abstract question: would the democratic symbolism of holding elections under fire really outweigh the distraction that campaigning for, organizing, and holding elections would pose to Ukraine's primary and extremely immediate effort, defending itself against full-scale invasion? In the face of all of these irreconcilable moving pieces, it feels relatively straightforward that elections are postponed until martial law is ended. Constitutionally speaking, President Zelensky is set to serve until a new president is sworn in, even though his original term would have ended in May 2024. And not only is Zelensky's extended wartime presidency backed up by law, it's also been deemed the best option by the people. A survey from February found that around 63% of Ukrainians believe that elections should wait until after hostilities cease, with only about 22% supporting an election while the war is ongoing. Zelensky responded to Trump's comments by essentially upping the ante. On Tuesday, he told journalists that Ukraine could hold election within the next 2 or 3 months if key security guarantees were provided by American and European allies. He reiterated the things I mentioned earlier: the millions of people displaced from their homes, the many others serving in the army, and the fact that Russia is launching attacks across the entire country on a regular basis, as reasons why an election can't be held immediately. But he said that if allies could step up their security guarantees, Ukraine wasn't opposed to re-examining the legislation around elections during martial law. Despite Zelensky's challenge, it's highly unlikely that we'll see either those hefty security guarantees or a presidential election in the next 90 days. Rather, this week's events should be seen as a slightly worrying slide further into pro-Russian rhetoric by Trump, and reiteration by Ukraine that they're willing to do whatever is needed to achieve peace, without selling themselves out. The topic of elections bubbles up every now and then, and is boosted online when Russia wants to discredit Zelensky. Inside Ukraine, Zelensky's popularity has taken a downward turn this year amid the government crackdown on anti-corruption agencies and the general dissatisfaction with his leadership as the full-scale invasion approaches its 4th year. A recent poll showed that only around 20% of respondents would vote for Zelensky as a first pick in a hypothetical presidential election, although he's still the projected winner in this and basically all other current hypotheticals. Meanwhile, other public figures in Ukraine's political and military worlds have been careful to distance themselves from the elections debate. Valery Zaluzhny, former commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces and now ambassador to the UK, publicly denied that he was organizing to run for president in Ukraine, underscoring the sensitivity of intertwining military reputations with partisan politics. Others who have been named as political challengers of Zelensky, including former President Petro Poroshenko and former Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko, have also voiced opposition to holding elections during war. In short, the call to hold elections in Ukraine is almost uniformly coming from outside Ukraine, and the country that stands the most to benefit from them is Russia. Our birthday campaign is over, and thank you again to the now more than 25,000 people around the world who support us every month. When you become a member of the Kyiv independent community, you not only make independent journalism in Ukraine possible, but you also get some cool insider perks in return, like discounts on our merch, exclusive content, and interactivity with our staff. You can check out the link in the description below to find out more. Thank you also to everyone who donates directly via YouTube. Your donations go directly towards supporting shows like this. Last Sunday, at a conference in the Middle East, Donald Trump Jr. publicly criticized Ukraine, calling it far more corrupt than Russia, and then idly saying that the US might withdraw its support if Kyiv fails to reach a peace deal. He offered up unsubstantiated observations correlating Ukrainian license plates in Monaco with stolen military aid, and implied that the US has acted as a blank checkbook to Ukraine for too long. It should be noted that American investigators from the Defense and State Departments have made multiple visits to Ukraine and reported no findings of military aid theft, and that corruption scandals in Ukraine are at the forefront of the public consciousness, as proved by the mass demonstrations in support of anti-corruption efforts this summer. Despite not being a US official per se, Don Jr.'s words can still be taken as a reflection of the Trump inner circle's beliefs. It should be noted that this year the Trump administration has dismantled several federal anti-corruption watchdogs and accepted a luxury jet from the Qatari government, making it a bit rich for Trump's son to be preaching about Ukrainian corruption, to say nothing of his blithe assertion that his father might abandon the peace process. But regarding the peace process, on Tuesday, Kyiv and European allies finalized a peace proposal with intent to present it to US counterparts. According to Zelensky, the revised proposal was shaped through consultations in London and is intended to inject a unified European perspective into the talks. Whether the process would move forward, he said, would still depend on Russia's willingness to halt the war and meaningfully engage. Also on Tuesday, Zelensky outlined a three-track negotiation plan aimed at breaking the existing diplomatic gridlock. The approach is structured around a peace agreement, security guarantees, and a reconstruction plan. The idea behind the model is to move away from negotiating on a solely military political basis, which has proven untenable, and to think long-term when it comes to stability and defense. On Wednesday, Ukraine and the US held the first session of a working group dedicated to Ukraine's reconstruction and economic recovery, which Zelensky framed as in line with the plan. As I said last week, it's hard to be optimistic that any one strategy or plan or framework laid out by any party is going to lead to a breakthrough under current circumstances. Rather, these plans demonstrate how irreconcilable things remain as the war closes in on its fourth year, and self-proclaimed peacemaker Trump approaches the first anniversary of his return to office. Symbolic steps like forming the Reconstruction Working Group may show willingness on Ukraine's part to cooperate, but don't hide the fact that discussing reconstruction without peace is somewhat pointless. Like I said last week, there's been diplomatic engagement, but not diplomatic progress. FIFA, soccer's largest governing body, has reportedly pressured multiple European clubs to pay outstanding balances to Russia despite sanctions, essentially telling people to break national law in order to stay within the international federation's good graces. This certainly isn't the first time FIFA has found itself caught in controversy. It has a colorful history of corruption and dubious practices, and marks one more in a string of actions that undermine the body's stated support of Ukraine. So, what happened this time? When the full-scale invasion began in 2022, various soccer teams in Europe still owed Russian clubs money for players who had been transferred. When Europe began imposing sanctions on Russia, the clubs that still owed money had no way to legally make the payments without finding themselves in violation of their own laws. So, they didn't. The Russian clubs filed complaints with FIFA saying that they hadn't been paid, and FIFA in turn told the European clubs to just go ahead and pay the Russian clubs anyway to find a way or risk being banned. England's West Ham and Sweden's Djurgården are the only two of the 8 clubs ordered by FIFA to pay that were able to successfully litigate out of it. Russia has been banned from all FIFA competitions since 2022, although since 2023 it has been allowed back into the Under-17 League. The past months have seen a sharp uptick in Russians being allowed back into international sports, as suspensions and bans are upheld and revoked on a sport-by-sport basis, and the qualifications of a neutral athlete become increasingly subjective. Many of these cases, like that of FIFA and the sanctions, highlight a depressing reality. Although many sporting bodies banned Russia from competition in 2022 amid their statements of support for Ukraine, there are many degrees by which such statements can be walked back behind the scenes. FIFA President Gianni Infantino said earlier this year that he looks forward to reintegrating Russia into the league when everything is solved in Ukraine. May we all have such a rosy view of European unity as a conglomerate trying to sell tickets to the next World Cup.
Hey everyone, I'm Kate Surkan, the Kyiv Independence culture reporter, and I'm here with this week's member question. So Luis Rodrigo Menendez asks, all the Russian-backed peace talks, quote-unquote, are about the importance of Ukraine protecting the rights of so-called Russian-speaking minorities, but they don't mention the rights or protection of Ukrainian-speaking people in the occupied territories, which I think is crucial if the front line gets frozen. Why isn't this part of the discussion? Even if Russia doesn't fulfill its commitments, shouldn't this be included in any real peace plan? This, Luis, is a great question, and let's just unpack that a bit. So when Russia is talking about the rights of Russian speakers, they're trying to say that if you speak Russian, then you are Russian. But Russian, like English or French, is an imperial language, and so a lot of people who are not Russian speak Russian, sometimes even as their first language. And the thing is, in Ukraine, because of the Russian Empire and later the Soviet Union controlling large swaths of Ukrainian territory, it means that nearly everybody today, to some extent, understands Russian, even if they don't speak it. So talking about the Russian speakers is a very manipulative talking point on Russia's behalf. And even so, the people who are predominantly Russian speakers in the occupied territories are sometimes targets of the police state that exists there. Civilians can be arrested for rather arbitrary reasons and then disappear in the Russian prison systems because they are suddenly deemed terrorists by the occupation authorities there. This is all not even to mention that to speak Ukrainian, is something that will put you in danger. Some of the first people that the occupation authorities go after when they come into power are Ukrainian language teachers, historians, literature teachers. So for all of the talk Russia has about criticizing de-Russification in Ukraine, there is absolutely no possibility to be a Ukrainian speaker in the occupied territories. So this is a very complicated situation that it even goes beyond language. I mean, just to be Ukrainian and a free thinker, or even, as I said, in the wrong place at the wrong time, can put you in a world of hell. And this is why when we're talking about occupied territories, cannot just talk about them as swaths of land, but places where people have lives going back for generations, and not all of them are pro-Russian for many reasons: economic, family, health. They are stuck there sometimes, so it's important not to forget about these people.
That's all for this week. We'll be back next Sunday with more news from Ukraine. If you appreciated this video, please consider becoming a member of the Kyiv Independent community. It's thanks to viewers like you that we can do this work, and we're so grateful for your support. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.